Welcome to the More Life Podcast, where creatives, problem solvers, and entrepreneurs talk about squeezing more out and finding meaning in this crazy thing we call life. Let's dive in. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the More Life Podcast. I'm Bart for you around here. And today we have a very special guest with us today. We have Rebecca Bruzzese, a visual artist, self-proclaimed neurodivergent, a marketing strategist, and jack of all trades. So, Rebecca, please say hello to everybody.
Hi, and thank you so much for having me, Bart. Really looking forward to this and getting to chat. I'm super excited to share some insight and kind of what being a neurodivergent corporate girly and entrepreneur looks like.
You straddle both the corporate and the creative, the strategic and the tactical. I'd love to hear how you introduce yourself when you meet somebody, because you do a lot of different things. And if you look you up online, there's a very corporate presence, but there's also a very artistic presence as well. So which one do you lean into more?
It's funny because I thought about that even just going into this today. I was like if they ask like what my title is, what do I say? And it very much for me, I think depends on what I'm looking to get out of this situation or what I think that person is interested in. So, if I'm in a group full of graffiti artists, I'm not going to be like, "Hey, yeah, I'm marketing strategist."
Yeah.
Or similarly at a networking event, I'm not like, "Yeah, I paint on knives and saws sometimes."
So how did this start? Were you artistic as a young person, or were you just a creative of later in life?
Art and creativity was something that I took to at a very, very young age. I was also blessed to have two parents that are also very creative. My dad's a phenomenal illustrator. My mom's a great painter.
Wow.
So I got very, very lucky in that sense. And it was a really great outlet when I didn't know what else I wanted to do.
Right. Okay. And this is something that you were lucky enough to see presented before you. My daughter sometimes believes that I'm like an actual artist. Um, and I'm like, kind of, maybe I want you to do greater than what I'm doing. She's a real artist. Like, I was not like her as a child, where she sees something once and she'll just practice drawing it over and over and over again. And I never had that itch the same way. But there's definitely something that you can tell from an early age, where somebody is like, they're drawn to this. This is a way of expression for them, and it helps them sometimes alleviate anxiety, or it helps them process emotions. It helps them feel at ease. And creativity is such a cool thing. I think we were created to be that way, to kind of find a way that works with us, to express ourselves. Some people that's, visual arts. Some people it's going to be like music and listening to the kind of music that really inspires you, or making music, playing instruments, all that different type of stuff. So for you, as you're growing up and you're finding your passions, what are some of your early influences as you're, learning the craft of artistry, of being an artist and drawing and painting?
A lot of the early influences actually came from, this is going to sound so cheesy, but my dad's sketchbook. My dad grew up in, it was kind of like a boarding-ish school, and he got to do all these cool art lessons, and he had this sketchbook, and there was one sketch of in it, and it was the devil. And I remember, like, as a child, I was like horrified. I was like, you don't,
Yeah, as
that's
one
not a
would be.
thing.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, no, that was cool though, because it was a very nice, attractive piece of art with a strange subject. So that kind of immediately set me off on a tangent of, okay, let's make weird things. And it was awesome. And it was a really, yeah, I feel bad for people who kind of had to struggle or fight for their creative purpose,
Mhm.
where I kind of got handed mine or passed down mine almost. But it's something I'm very thankful for, and it's cool getting to utilize it in different ways.
That's so true. A lot of people don't know where to go, where maybe they are creative, they like to work with their hands, or maybe they see things in their minds and they don't know what the next step is. And there is a very kind of luxury of being, oh wow, this is this is the logical next step for me. Like, clearly, I have two prime examples here who are going to be able to help me hone in this craft, and it probably also helped your personal relationship with your parents, because you had this very strong, deeply rooted thing that existed in all three of you, where you can kind of be like, okay, we connect at a certain base frequency already because we all have this one thing, where we're all completely in sync with. But for a lot of people who are coming up, I feel like I've met some people like this, not often, who are kind of like, I know you're creative, but you just don't know what you're supposed to be doing. And I don't know, how do you help someone like that? Like, have you encountered that?
Yeah, and I've done it even myself too, where um touching on the neurodivergence a bit, because of my ADHD, I tend to jump from one thing to another, or I get bored of something quickly. So I'm sitting there with all this creative energy, and my tried and trues aren't working, it's not going the way I want it to, or it doesn't feel the way I want it to. And I will just try something else. And that was, somebody said, just create. And I said, okay. So that's how I wound up doing jewelry for a brief stint. Just
Love it.
like trying out different mediums to create. And I think that's true even in the professional and corporate worlds, trying it, just trying something. And then
Yeah.
if it doesn't work, at least you have a jumping off point. Say, okay, I didn't like this, but I did like this. So let's go that way.
Yeah, and being somebody who's neurodivergent, I'm married to somebody who is. It's such a superpower, but it takes honing in. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
you gotta hone it. It's like you're basically like Spider-Man.
Yep.
You don't know how powerful you are, and you have all these capabilities. But in every Spider-Man movie, there's that montage where he's trying to learn how to spit out the webs and how to actually swing and how to use his super strength and how to call on that spidey sense. So there's this super functionality inside the brain, and usually when you see super functionality of a brain, it's a linear or logical pathway. And with ADHD specifically, sometimes it can express itself in creative pathways. So it's not just somebody who's very analytical and somebody who is, very up and down, black and white. It has to be a very specific way. Don't mess with my systems. But sometimes it can be like, hey, you see a broader spectrum of the world than other people would naturally see. And you have this superpower of kind of seeing the forest for the trees, even in creativity and art, in business and school. But it's one of those things where it's like, you have the power of the sun, but how do I focus it into like one task?
That's exactly. It's, yeah. How do you explain that? Like, I was talking to a coworker about this yesterday. Yeah, I love blasting metal music in my headphones while I work, but if there's too much noise at the grocery store, I'll cry. Like, that's finding finding the balance between like the extremes of it is really that kind of sweet spot, and it's a struggle, and I think it's an ongoing struggle for most, if not all, neurodivergent people.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, were you diagnosed with ADHD early on? Like, was this something that helped you in your creative process when you were like an up and coming, maybe teenager, young person, uh, learning your craft?
Yes and no. So I wasn't diagnosed at an early age. I was diagnosed, I think, 5 or 6 years ago now, so later in
Okay.
life. But like there were glaring red flags and
Signs.
alarm bells
It was
everywhere.
a different time. We
It
didn't,
it, it
send people out for
absolutely, especially
diagnoses.
for young women too. Like nobody
Yeah.
was even looking at like young girls when the topic of ADHD came up.
Yeah.
And so I was lucky that my parents kind of fostered my ADHD traits in a positive way, regardless, without knowing what they were. Um,
Mm.
but it also created
I gotta meet your
struggles.
parents.
They are saints. Oh, they're awesome. um, and yeah, just getting to them giving me the space to explore my own identity within creativity and kind of what I wanted to do was a huge benefit. But there were also the struggles of being able to explain, oh, I dropped out of this college program, now I want to do this one. Or, why are you laying on the couch for 3 days? Why you should be looking for a job. So there's a balance, but it was
Yes.
yeah, I think had I been diagnosed earlier, it would have been an easier pathway, but I don't think that it would have been the
Mm,
same pathway.
right. And you're thankful for the pathway that you were kind of afforded to have. Like it's your
Yeah.
journey. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where did you go to school? Let's say post secondary, because you mentioned you maybe changed programs a few times.
Yeah,
I
so
also did that, so yeah, I know the feeling.
this is the best timeline. So my parents they knew I wasn't going to know exactly what I wanted to do right out of high school. I think it's baffling that we expect children to in the first place.
Facts.
Um and so they were like, okay, you just have to go for something. So I went to Conestoga College for international bartending and mixology, which,
International.
yeah, which I don't know what the difference was between Canadian, but yeah. So I did not complete that. I did get this required certificates out of it, but I didn't complete the program. From there, I went to Seneca College and I did pre-business.
Mhm.
And that was when I started discovering numbers. And I was like, okay, maybe math doesn't suck as much as high school made it suck. And I fell into forensic accounting.
Yep.
So I completed.
That should really be like a whole other podcast. High school math sucks and college math is interesting. But
It
please continue.
it
It's such
it
a
no,
unique
it
thing.
totally is. That's my partner is an astrophysicist and data scientist. So
Okay.
like getting to hear the math that he does, I'm like, if you were telling teenagers about that, like what you're using the math for, they'd be interested.
Yes.
um,
100%.
but yeah, so I completed that, worked in the field for a couple of years, could not stand it. It was sitting in a chair in an office, cookie cutter office, staring at spreadsheets. It's not in my head. I think I thought forensic accountant was like working for the police, not like trying to find a line error from 3 books ago.
Yeah.
And then I kind of hopped around and fell into marketing within that same company.
Mm.
And then I was like, oh, wait a minute, this is a thing. And then I started pursuing education towards marketing while I was working. So I did online
Awesome.
through Columbia University and Harvard X, which I don't think exists anymore.
Yeah, that's recent that they changed Harvard X.
I noticed because all I saw was the logo drop off my LinkedIn, and I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah. That was like I think too many people were using it to kind of flex on people that I went to Harvard.
Oh, jeez.
Um,
I always like made sure I said the X very loud because I was like, I don't want people to think I went to Harvard.
yeah, exactly. A lot of people that go to Harvard, that's how you know that they actually went to Harvard. They don't want people to know that they
Yep.
went to Harvard. It's like a whole like I don't want that attention. Like it's too much.
It's like Fight Club. The first rule, you don't talk about
Yeah, don't talk
it.
about it. We don't want to. We don't want to. We don't need to know that.
Yeah.
Don't call out my privilege. All that kind of stuff. So okay, so you were kind of thrusted into marketing by almost discovering its uniqueness or its attainability within the company that you were working in, and what was your first role there in terms of you're a creative person who found numbers who then found marketing, which is kind of like in some cases, depending on the company you're working for, a beautiful balance of the two of creativity and strategy. How do we make these tactical and beautiful things kind of work together? So, what was your first role in this? Was it like a coordinator? Was it more of like a manager or?
So it was originally a social media manager.
Yep.
So I was the Instagram girl. I was
Mm-hmm.
I was doing the graphics copy, and then down the road, I started to get interested into advertising and
Nice.
exploring the ad side of it. So I very much got to it was like a corporate sandbox of learning marketing within my role, which was a really, really great way to do it. And that was in the early days of Instagram, but it was things were different back in
Yes.
like 10 years ago.
Yeah, well, especially, yeah, 10 years ago, having a social media person in your business was like, we're gonna take over the world, right? Like, it was very important for a lot of businesses to be able to identify how it was like the open landscape of how is social media gonna change real business and the bottom line of a business.
It's similar. As I was actually saying this the other day, that feels similar to what AI is doing right now. How
Oh yeah,
everybody's kind of like, oh, wait a minute, we're gonna have to learn how to live with this. We have to play this game. So it's
and
a
it's
very
very
similar.
fast now.
Oh yes.
Faster than what's happening with Instagram and Facebook. And people are like, wait a minute, this toy could be a tool for my business. This AI thing, you can't even open up YouTube without there being 100 videos about here are the 10 marketing prompts that I use to create this, concept. And like, whoa, people are the rate of adoption is astronomically faster than what the last big thing was. If you remember, during the pandemic, the early stages, everybody and their mother was talking that crypto was the next big thing.
Yep.
uh this is going to change everything. The blockchain is going to revolutionize your life, and you saw how fast some people adopted it, and then we saw this greater thing happen underneath with AI and ChatGPT and the Bing search engine, how fast this thing has exploded, and the adoption rate is like quadruple of what crypto is, and everyone and their mother is using it, and it's such a unique place to see how it's garnered that adoption and how it's affecting already so many businesses. We use it ourselves to kind of workshop YouTube titles for our YouTube videos. Like, it's just a ginormous tool, and I really think AI is like. Is it oversaturated? I don't know, or is it just happening really fast? I really can't tell you.
It feels like similar to when cannabis was legalized in
Yes.
Canada, and one popped up on every corner in the city, and now they are all shuttered up except for the big ones.
Yep.
So it's very, I go into it, especially with new technologies, kind of like a trust but verify. So I'm like, okay, you're
Yeah.
saying all these things. This sounds great. If it works like that, awesome. But I do want to look a little bit into more of it and see how it plays out.
Yeah. How did you find working doing social media for business, 9, 10 years ago when it was such a wild west experience? What were you guys just throwing everything at the wall? Were you guys just having like brainstorming sessions and be like, what if we try this? Let's see what happens.
It was very much, I was handed a company phone, said, "You're young, here's Instagram, take some pictures." And I went, "Okay." And so our early posts were things like, "Oh, so and so's eating this for lunch today. Like if you also like pasta." And
That's great.
but then from that, you see like the marketing trends come out of that where, yeah, engagement is important, call to actions are important. And so it's interesting to look back and say, oh, we were doing that, we just didn't know what we were doing at the time or how to optimize it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's such a unique, like, first of all, simpler times, just posting
Oh
your
yeah.
lunch. Such simpler times. Now there is so much thought and process that have to go into a post, and even the way people use stories more than posts, because it's like my feed is curated. I don't want to post every single second of every day. I now want to make sure that my feed represents exactly what I set out it for to represent, and the story is where I kind of share a lot of personality. And then you see people use different ways of using stories, whether it's talking directly to camera, whether it's the new style now, like TikTok has made popular and has shown up on stories, which is the daily vlogs, the mini vlogs rather, where you can have a micro narrated existence of what you're doing, which is still the same mundane stuff of behind the scenes of your life, but it's now way more aesthetic. It's curated. The shots are better. It goes across maybe 3, 4 stories, and it's narrated. There's the growth of that platform, especially in Instagram, is for depending on the industry you're in. It has really changed and affected a lot of businesses. And like I mentioned before, if you had a remotely cool or interesting business, being the social media manager could have been a very um, cavalier, pioneering type of role 9 years ago, where it's like, hey, we got something really cool to talk about, and we have this brand new way to do it, and we get to kind of make those type of strategy plans. Was this like a role that it was just you, or did you have somebody helping you with like graphics or like coordination with scheduling and all that kind of stuff?
So I had somebody to help with graphics, but the coordination and scheduling, it was just me.
Yeah.
And it eventually, once the business or once social media, I guess, as a tactic within the business grew, we were able to build a team out of that. So that was actually my first venture into like team leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that was a whole new adventure. And that kind like team leadership within such a subjective field as marketing, where it's not like accounting. There's no right or wrong answer. It's
Huh.
there's I mean, KPIs still exist, but
Yeah.
it's
The relevance,
everybody.
though.
Yes,
It's
yeah,
how relevant is it towards anything else?
everything is contextual in marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's yeah, you can't just hand somebody something and be like, okay, I want this to go viral by the end of the day. It's not how that works,
Yeah,
despite people still think it does.
we're in the process right now of writing a YouTube video talking about marketing goals versus business goals, how they work together, and it takes a lot of companies who are new to the space of marketing online to understand that they are in direct correlation to each other. And when you're in the level that you're at that point, you're leading a team of people. Were you given an opportunity to kind of help make those connections between what our marketing goals are and how they serve our business goals?
I wasn't yet at that company. That's something that I
Mm.
kind of explored later in my career. So it was, and I think was where I struggled, and that almost turned me away from marketing a bit, was not being able to connect the dots, not being able to say,
Yes.
okay, we have 500 followers, but is that impacting our revenue? How do we know if that's impacting revenue? What does that mean to us, or why do we care?
Yeah.
So missing that connection and not getting to see that bigger picture, even to just be aware of it, is a huge, huge part of marketing, I think.
Yeah, my first marketing role in a corporate setting, I did not understand that that was a possibility until I was talking with a colleague or somebody else who worked at a different company, who was explaining how they were in certain meetings. I'm like, you get to go to those plenary meetings, and they're like, yeah, we have to. I'm the marketing coordinator. I'm like, so just you? Who else goes? It's like me and the communications director, and we'll have the VP of marketing. We'll have so and so, and like, so you guys are all here having like the 6 month out conversation. What's happening for the calendar in 2020? Whatever that's happening like right now. It's like, yeah. I'm like, I didn't know that was possible. I just get my own individual objectives and OKRs and KPIs, and we hit those, and we don't know what that means, and we don't understand what the customer feedback is and how it's going to change. Or he's like, yeah, no, no, you should ask to be in those meetings. I was like, whoa, you just turned on a light bulb I didn't even know was able to be turned on. I was super young. I didn't know any better. And once you realize that, oh, I'm a huge asset, or at least my perspective is extremely important to the bottom line of the company in terms of its sales goals, in terms of its customer satisfaction, and all those different things, in terms of customer loyalty. And when you have a boss who understands that relationship, it is a game changer to feeling validated and to have an understanding, of the purpose of why am I here. And I think you touched a little bit on team development. If you want to be, at the time I was a team member, I had maybe one other person working for me, but I was part of a bigger marketing team, and that's one thing I wish I had, was that buy-in. There was nothing for me to buy into.
Yeah, the fastest I have ever checked out of a job before was when I had a CEO look me in the eyes and tell me marketing shouldn't care about numbers. And I
Oh,
was like,
You missed the mark completely. You don't
I
understand.
was like, all right, yep, we're going to turn on that LinkedIn and
LinkedIn Premium.
yeah, I'll pay the extra. We need out of
Yes.
here. But it's interesting too because I think that even within companies and more so in bigger corporations, there's kind of a disconnect with it, like intercompany of what marketing's function is. People will reach out to marketing for the strangest requests, and I'm like, we don't do that. What do you think we do all day?
Yeah, it's very very funny. Um, the bio that you sent us said jack of all trades, and I love that it said that. Because I feel like that sometimes myself, where I'm like, I want to make a video and I have this idea. We're gonna make a short commercial for what, Bart? Just for this experiment that I have because I saw something and it inspired me. And then there's also the Bart who loves to build systems and processes and map out project management and forecasting and building a business. And there's also the Bart that once in a while who also is creative and artistic and wants to design something because there's something that's inside of me that I want to live it out and do that. And there's all these different aspects of being a jack of all trades. But I think the people who are the jack of all trades are the one who are most likely to, I hate the word burnout, but feel where there's a creativity drought because you already need to be creative as a strategist on demand. And so, how do you combat or accept? Some people like that. I always think of Mr. Beast, who says, I go balls to the walls, hardcore. These are his words, not mine. I go balls to the walls for as much as I can, which is usually I sleep at my office once or twice a week for about 2 to 3 weeks, and then I'm usually tired, and I'll take about a week to a week off, and I go right back at it and do it again. So there's some people that like to do it that way. There's some people who so they embrace the burnout. Some people are trying to avoid the burnout. I'm taking micro doses of relief, and I'm really trying to master my resiliency so that I don't have to be burnt out and I can have optimum, what's that called? Optimum performance or output, rather, on a consistent basis.
I think the big key for me, and because I was totally the Mr. Beast type, where I would just go hard, burn out, recoup, do it again, rinse and
Yeah.
repeat. And then I was like, I turned 30 and I was like, this isn't really sustainable. I can't be drinking Red Bulls at 7:30 every morning. Um,
Yeah.
and
That's a young person's flex.
yeah,
That's not a someone under 30's flex.
after a while it goes from like, oh, they're fun and hip to like, oh, that's kind of sad. But so I found really the key was not even in like scheduling my work, but being able to mentally disconnect from my work. And for me, that was so now I work in the education space. So this is
Hmm.
a field that I have very little lived experience in, aside from attending colleges, universities, um, and it's one that I'm passionate about, but I don't deeply care about. And
Hmm.
that's, I think, where I struggled the most with, and still struggle with my own like artist business, is being able to not care. And because that's really where the time, like the suck on your soul is when
Yep.
you're emotional about it. So being able to disconnect from your work or hobby. Sometimes you're stressed about an art project you're working on, and it's, yeah, just being able to emotionally disconnect was the key piece that I was
Interesting.
missing.
Yeah, I think that when you're too emotionally involved, you might think that all the weight of that project or idea lives on you, and it provides undue and really narcissistic, it just provides a narcissistic type of weight where it's like, oh no, I have to, because who else could?
Yeah.
And it's all on me. And it's like, no, no, this project, if or this idea, if it's good, A, must stand on its own 2 feet. And B, my role, whether it's something that is creative or managerial, is to empower others to see what I'm seeing. So if I'm, I have an idea, like we have right now, we have an idea for a marketing course that we're producing. The marketing course has to be good on its own. Like if it's not a good marketing course, why am I putting all this effort and energy into something like this if it's not something that I really believe can be good and change people's lives and help them? Number two, my role is to help the people who are supporting me on my team see that vision and why it's important and how it can help people so that they can also pick up the slack and help me with this vision. But if I feel like it's just Bart that has to do it and write every word and record everything and edit every cut and upload the course and manage everything, then you're going to feel like, oh, I'm carrying um, the soul, the soul of this project and this whole entity, and it's going to feel draining at a very fast rate. Like it's just too much.
That's yeah, when it's like right now I'm working on a project at work that, I ideated, I'm executing it. It is my baby and it's my first really, really big project and it's going super well.
Good
And
for you.
but I know, thank you. But I noticed that like where I was like, oh, like I'm getting really stressed about this. And I was like, okay, so maybe like I need to take a step back and
Mm-hmm.
look at, okay, am I getting too invested? It's just a project. We're not paramedics. Nobody's going
Yeah,
to die if this Instagram post went out on the wrong hour. It's like
but
I
sometimes it does feel like someone's going to die.
it does. And I mean especially I imagine on the agency side having clients, it's
Yeah.
they think somebody's going to die when the Instagram post goes out on the wrong hour.
Yes. And even just for our stuff as well, we produce so much content. If one thing is out of sync, it throws off so much
Yeah.
other things where it's like, oh no, we were supposed to post this one thing today, but we post basically every day. So if now we have an extra post, are we moving the next 40 posts that we've created over a day? And does that mess up our alignment with our content strategy, with which blogs are going out? I'm like, missing a post is kind of a big deal, but also like, guys, can we calm down for a second?
Yep.
Maybe we just don't post a post. Maybe it's a
Yeah.
story now. Like, hey, just we're gonna be okay. We're gonna make it. And there's something about that where, especially when you talk about being an artist, the artist business side, which I think we should talk about next. How you can get really invested in it. There's good and there's bad to it. You need to kind of live in a project at the early stages to kind of understand what it is and what it could be before you then share it with other people who are either going to help you or either going to experience it from you. So as an artist, I'm sure you've seen this before where you have an idea. Maybe it's a set of prints, maybe it's the jewelry stuff that you talked about, where you're like, okay, I can't necessarily share this dream yet with anybody, and I kind of have to live with it and kind of grow it from infancy to toddlerhood, and I gotta live and breathe this thing. But there comes a point where you should be able to take a step back and be like, okay, good. So I've proven that this idea is viable. So now, what do I need to do so that it doesn't consume my entire life, with every ounce of my being, and I don't go outside for weeks and I sleep on the sofa with pizza on my chest? You know what I mean? Like that's not necessarily the healthiest thing that I should do, even though the creative and the entrepreneurial side of me is 100%. That's, of course, that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Why would you not want to throw yourself? I don't know if you suffer from this as well. I think use the word suffer lightly. Is I love the building phase, like the
Yep.
0 to 1 phase. Like we're right now, I still consider our agency kind of, we're at the 0.9999. We're almost at one, basically, where it's like it's rinse and repeat. But this is the phase that I love the most, is when you are building something from scratch and you get to identify and analyze, or even if it's artistic, when you are designing something from that initial research and development phase is the best.
Spreadsheets and dashboards, I will spend more time color coding them and like making everything perfect, all the functions working optimally for a dashboard that somebody's going to use for 30 seconds once every
Yep.
6 months. Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Building phase is the best.
It's the best phase because it's like, oh, it's a clean slate.
Yes.
It's a clean slate. I
Yep.
can do whatever. Um, so you mentioned your artist business, And I think you have like another website that's launching. Is that what's all connected together?
Yeah, so I'm kind of doing a weird shift right now. I originally was doing everything under the Becca Makes name, but
Hmm.
now that I've kind of happily settled into a corporate career, I'm trying to make that separation a little bit more.
Got it.
Um, which is, something you mentioned is when you Google my name, you'll find my artistic adventures as well as my corporate ones. So I'd like to
By the way,
have that.
guys, I don't mean to cut you off. If you have not, you need to go check out Becca Makes Blogs on Instagram. We're going to link it in the description. It's unbelievable art. It reminds me, if for those of you who are in the creative space, it reminds me a lot of if somebody assigned you the task with what would art look like on DeviantArt in 2023. That's what it reminds me of.
Oh my God, I am gonna have that sound bite just playing on a loop anytime I need serotonin.
Yeah. I'm sure DeviantArt was probably a big part of your life growing up, as it
Yep.
was mine. For those of you that don't know, I guess 20 years ago, or maybe like 15, 20 years ago, that was the spot to see other people's artwork, to see what people were doing, to understand how Photoshop worked, how visual artists were using effects to kind of make photorealistic, type of creations. And it totally influenced me in how I thought of probably more than me going to college for graphic design, DeviantArt. I would spend hours on there. It was like a graphic design forum. I don't even know if it's still around, but it's taken over by probably by Dribble. Everyone wants to go to Dribble, but DeviantArt was like artists, doing artistic things. And when I look at your stuff, it very much reminds me of this visual artist slash visual graphic artist merging together, and it has this really badass punk rock edge to it, that also reminds me a lot of deviant art, where a lot of it was like bleeding hearts and
Absolutely. No, and I appreciate you hit the nail on the head. That's awesome. Um,
so what you were going for.
yeah, absolutely. And that really was the core of it. It was things that I like ideas that I've had in my head or in old sketchbooks that I
Mm,
revisited and I said, I drew this 16, 17 years ago. What would this look like if I did it now? So that's what I
wow.
did. So a lot of the stuff is really early terrible concepts that I had, but now I have the skills to execute.
Wow, I really did know the nail on the head, because
Yeah,
it is
absolutely.
today's version,
Yeah.
but the concepts are definitely not from this era. They're from a
No.
different era.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that I've always really, like I mentioned, enjoying with my or exploring with my art is kind of the darker, the more taboo things that you wouldn't
Hmm.
see in a painting or drawing. And tattoo art is something that has always inspired me, so that the early Sailor Jerry American traditional style comes up a lot.
Hmm. Yep.
And it's just, yeah, the freedom of creating what I feel like creating, which is why I like to have that disconnect between kind of my corporate Rebecca versus artist
Yes.
Rebecca. Um,
It's like your alter ego.
but
Becca is the
yeah,
artist. Rebecca is the professional.
and I like it's not like I'm out here like painting horrible imagery like it's like skulls. Oh no, but it's just being able to not have that pressure of
Yeah.
caring what people think about it or caring what people think about me in that capacity.
Got it. And so this business, or the Rebecca blog that's coming out now, this is going to be more towards marketing, more towards your professional life, more about some of the things you're doing there. Okay. Are
Yeah.
you launching like your own type of business, like a consultancy on the side type thing?
No, no, no. It's more a professional portfolio kind of website.
Got it.
Something that I do in my free time, if you can believe it does exist. Started working with charities. Right now, I'm working with
Nice.
one called the Guatemala Stove Project,
Mm.
and I'm helping them basically rebrand. Their website had not only functionality but just things they could be optimizing. So I took notice. I sent them an email and I said, "Hey, I'm happy to help you guys out with this." So I've always really enjoyed kind of working charity work and philanthropy into what I do. Um, so
That's
that's
amazing.
kind of what that's geared toward. Thank you.
Yeah, and it also provides you understanding more diverse stories, like just different perspectives and
Yeah.
stories, which to me is like a learning ground. As a creative, that's the best way for me to do stuff is to be able to like go and do stuff.
Yeah. And
You know what I mean?
that's, yeah,
Go
that's
ahead.
why I've always really enjoyed having, or not enjoyed, but I've always made sure that I have some sort of side business, whether it's something I'm taking really seriously or not,
Mm,
but to be able to kind of test the ideas that I have that I want to try on a larger scale at work, but not with as much at stake. So getting
mm,
to, or testing out, new Instagram trends, saying, okay, does this work? Can I do this? And
yeah,
getting to get the business intel from kind of that side of it.
yeah.
Yeah.
So now you're kind of not settled, but you are in a position where you can probably see a few years out of your career. What would you tell your younger self? Because I feel like you had such a strong trajectory towards art. You landed in, numbers and analytics, and then you transitioned. Like your career started off kind of like this weird loop de loop, but now you've gotten to a place where you seem and you sound very comfortable and content. And so I'm like, okay, so what would you tell younger Rebecca who is drawing her heart out and trying to figure life out?
I would I would give her the full quote of Jack of all trades because that is something that people weaponized towards me as a child. They'd be like, "Oh, you're a jack of all trades, you're not really good at one thing." And I was like, "Well, no, I'm good at a lot of things, which I think is a really good thing." And I later in life, I wasn't able to find the actual source for the extended quote, but it's Jack of all trades, master of none is oftentimes better than a master of one.
Yep.
And that it's okay to flounder about and not get your footing. Just figure things out your own way, follow your path your way. And I think that's extra bonus towards the ADHD side because a lot of the times we do have to figure out our own path regardless because the
Yep.
existing path isn't built for us.
Yep.
So I think it just embracing the differences and playing to those, play to your strengths.
Yeah, especially nowadays, the world is moving so fast, so don't let that dictate your speed.
Yeah.
Where we're forcing kids at 17, 18 to kind of make really big, tough decisions, and it's okay if you don't know, and it's okay if it takes you a little bit longer. Just because the world is moving that fast doesn't mean that you have to race through your life as well. You
Yeah.
get to kind of choose your speed as well, whatever you're most comfortable with. This is such a important and great conversation that we've had. I'm so thankful that you've been here with us, Rebecca.
Oh, thank you so much for
Where can
having
people
me.
find you?
So you can find me on Instagram at Becca Makes Blog, LinkedIn, Rebecca Bruzzese. Um, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Don't phone me, please, ever, if you've managed to find my phone number somewhere. But
Do not use
no,
the phone, okay?
no.
We're not boomers. Don't call us ever. Well, guys, this has been the More Life Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoy this content, I'd ask that you like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up or subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. I've been Bart, and this has been the More Life Podcast. Peace out.